Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Uninvited Opinions. Nax, it's been some time since we've done one of these recordings. How have you been so far?
And frankly, the cricket has been frenetic in this time, and actually, there's been a lot to follow, a lot to consume. So yeah, it has kept me busy, and I'm glad that we are back. I'm giving the opportunity to come back and express our opinions about what we have seen in the cricketing world over these past few months.
Yeah, I know it wasn't a conscious break. I think we wanted to record for the Australia series, and I contracted COVID, and that meant that there was an uh, illness-induced absence for a while. And now we are back, but we were always trying to figure out what's the best time to record. And now seems a more opportune moment than ever, given that we're just at the what we are today is supposed to be the final day of the series between India and England. Never mind that the series ended 2 days ago. What were your impressions of the series?
Interesting series. I thought I personally expected a lot more in terms of playing time to begin with, and also in terms of the quality on offer. So I believe we've been left with a little bit to be desired for. But nevertheless, for all the shifting of the goalposts, as Ravi Shastri rightly put, India managed to reach the eventual target of actually making it to the World Test Championship finals. So they got the result that they desired, and I think that actually made for some interesting viewing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned shifting of the goalposts. I think it was necessary given that a lot of cricket was suspended because of COVID and a lot of tours were cancelled. But I was quite disappointed to start, to start with the point system that was in place for the World Test Championship, which did not reward the number of Test matches that you played, but rather how it seemed to be rewarding the shorter. Teams playing the shorter series actually, because if you win two Test matches instead of uh, playing five and winning five, you still ended up with the same number of points. So I don't know who comes up with the point system at ICC, but they always seem to mess it up. Nevertheless, we're now at the end of the series, and we thought we'd do a series review today. What are the key talking points for you as far as the series are concerned? I know there's been a lot of debate on a lot of things. What are the key things that you want to talk about?
Well, it's interesting that we start about a series back home in India where we think, oh yes, this is the time where the Indian batsmen are going to be licking their lips, foreign spinners, and you are back from a tough series in Australia where run scoring was difficult, and you think now is the opportunity. I'm going to make the most of it, and I'm going to score big. And I believe a lot of the batsmen in the Indian side were due for some big runs. And I felt that was one of the biggest talking points, that we actually went through the entire series with just one top order batsman scoring a quality 100. That was Rohit Sharma,
Yeah,
which of course turned out to be a series defining knock.
yeah,
But outside of that, you're looking at more or less the lower middle order kind of bailing out the top order frailties. A lot was promised of Shubman Gill. He obviously showed his promise in glimpses, where he had a flashy knock of 50 odd. But then Pujara was uncharacteristically out of form. Ajinkya Rahane, I don't know what's eating him. And Virat Kohli, I think as long as the results of the series go his way, I'm sure he's not going to complain. But I think he's due for a big one for some time now.
yeah. I think you're bang on the money actually. Imagine if Rohit Sharma hadn't performed, then we would have been in a right big mess. And in a way, it was quite surprising that batsmen who were in fairly decent form in Australia, Pujara and Rahane, they really struggled at home. Pujara has never had such a lean series at home. And I think from an Indian perspective, it on the one hand, it's pleasing that we still found batsmen to make enough runs. Uh, but you'd want your big batsmen to have dominated the game. And I almost got the feeling a lot of times our batsmen got out. They almost wanted to stamp the dominance on the English bowlers, as if to show this is our home ground. We're playing on turning pitches, but we know how to play on turning pitches. So we're going to we're going to dominate you. An example would be, say, Virat Kohli on day one of Chennai. Of the second Chennai test, sorry. He was trying to cover drive Moeen Ali, third or fourth ball, and got bowled through the gate. And I'm not, that was just an example which immediately sprung to mind. But there's a classic case of us trying to sort of dominate the English bowlers, who I think, in all fairness, I think the England team bowled really well in the conditions. They the bowled splendidly in the first test. They had the runs on the board to sort of back it up. But right through, James Anderson, Jack Leach, they bowled quite well. Anderson was superb. Every time Anderson came on to bowl, I had my heart skip a beat, because he was making the ball do things even in that heat in India. But and Leach was also, despite the mauling in the first innings, in the first test match, he came back really well. And bowled with a fair amount of control, but I don't think they had a lot of support. And I think that combined with woeful batting probably led to the series loss, actually.
Yeah, actually, Jack Leach has been looking forward to the series for some time. That for foreign spinners, it is oftentimes the biggest challenge, as well as it's the biggest opportunity, because they never get to play on turning pitches like this. And I think he's proven his worth in terms of his accuracy, his consistency. There were very seldom bad balls, loose balls on offer, and it's almost like you're waiting for the natural variation for the ball to go straight through. And for that, you need to basically be pitching within the stumps. And I think that's what he did most often. So he was actually challenging both edges. And it was quite a good outing for him. And James Anderson, I think that reverse swing spell was at the first test in Chennai, where obviously India was under the pump. But some of the wickets that he got in that spell, it was just a small spell of 4 or 5 overs, but he was unplayable. Even in the final test in Ahmedabad, he had, I think, the first 5 overs did not concede a single run. So I think he commands the respect regardless of his age, regardless of the conditions. So I think those two are certainly the biggest positives in terms of the English bowling, and they challenged Indian batsmen adequately.
Yeah, you're bang on about Leach as well, because I think he bowled really well to the top order batsman, and he got Pujara out a number of times. Rohit, who was probably the most free-flowing top order batsman from the Indian side, he got out to Leach a few times. So it was not certainly easy facing him. So I think he'll take a lot of confidence from the series, and he's probably cemented his spot as the lead spinner in the team.
Not to forget the fifer for Joe Root, the bowler.
Well, I'd probably put it down to poor batting from both teams in that particular test match. That said, that's an interesting segue into the whole discussion on pitches, because I know you wanted to talk about them. What's your take?
Well, I've heard all the comments in the media and how bullish the Indian players have been to refute any claims of the pitches unreasonably favoring the home team. But I don't know. I just felt that somewhere down the line, as a viewer, I felt there was some truth to that allegation, if I may say so. We have seen India dominate foreign teams in the past. The Fab Four, the Quartet, those were the days where India and more or less every team would basically bring in quality batsmen, and the pitches would hold for a few days and then they'll crumble. And then, so everybody, in terms of whatever discipline, whatever skill you bring to the game, is in the game for some time. But then again, I feel that yes, these arguments are kind of very dicey, because you also had some pitches in New Zealand which have caught similar criticism, that the game hasn't lasted more than 2 days or 3 days. But yes, when you see the surface crumbling on the very first morning, the very first session, then you think maybe was the pitch underprepared, or was it deliberately made to be this way? The one thing that I would like to basically highlight is that if this was a deliberate ploy, then actually India must be very lucky, consider themselves lucky to actually come out unscathed out of it, because this can be a dual-edged sword. We saw what happened, I think, 4 years back in Pune, where Australia played India, and Australia actually batted first, and they just made a handful of runs, but they had good quality spinners in their ranks to get India out cheaply twice. So it just comes down to a kind of who is better prepared to handle those conditions. And if on that given day the opposition comes out trumps, then you are actually in a very precarious situation.
Yeah, I'm actually going to offer a counter view, because I think there's a lot made of, say, the pitch in the second test in Chennai, where I think Rohit Sharma batted brilliantly to take the pitch out of the equation. But if you actually look at it, yes, there was dust coming on, when the ball pitched when the ball pitched even on the first day, but it did not have uneven bounce. You did not have one ball bouncing too much and one ball keeping too low. It had even bounce all through the test. And then, so it took turn from day one, but that's fine, right? That's something that you might probably expect in India. The third test match, probably there is an element that the pitch aided turn a lot more, but I think that there's also something to do with the use of the pink ball. And I think more than anything else, I think you've got to listen to the players as well, because they've been saying that the ball was skidding on them a lot faster because it was the pink ball and because it had that extra lacquer. And that didn't happen with the red ball. So, but if you sort of consider that, you look at the first test, it was a pretty flat wicket. The second test, I think I made my case. It was not a bad pitch. There was no uneven bounce. The third test, I'm probably going to discount it because of the pink ball. And the fourth test was just simply, a good pitch. It had a bit of turn, but if you look at it, if you look across all the games, they had pretty even bounce. So they were not bad pitches. They were not crumbling pitches. So I think there's a lot made out of the pitches when the batsmen are unable to handle the turning ball. And again, I think even though it might appear that the Indian players and management are sort of pushing back quite hard on the topic of pitches, I think there's a grain of truth in that, because you never hear about the topic of pitches when Indian or Asian teams are traveling overseas. So I think it just comes with the territory, actually. So it's been like this for several years now. It's been this way for several years. So I still don't know why teams come to Asia, and then when the pitches take any sort of turn, they sort of start complaining right from day one. And interestingly, it's not the players who complain; it's the ex-players and the commentators and the observers who start sort of making noises about it. But I think that's just part and parcel. You've just got to accept it and move on. From our perspective, from a viewer's perspective, I'm just a fan. I have no stake in the game. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was really interesting. It was really interesting to see which batsman had the capability to cope with it. And sadly, from a fan's perspective, neither a lot of the Indian batsmen nor the English batsmen had, the ability to sort of deal with it. So I think Rohit Sharma played fantastically well in Chennai and Ahmedabad. Ashwin played really well in the second innings in the second test in Chennai, getting a fantastic century. Kohli made a half century. So it really showed that probably I think it was a combination of better Indian spinners combined with better technique demonstrated by the Indian specific Indian batsmen, which probably helped them win the key moments in the series. But that's my 2 cents. I know it's a lot to say for 2 cents, but there you go.
Yeah, true. I mean, it's you can't obviously lay all the blame on the pitches. Where, for example, that was my perspective. But I do agree that the quality of batsmanship was actually exposed here, and that more than contributed to the duration of the games that we've seen through the series. So I think that's probably the right time to discuss the next point, which is whether England always had the right personnel uh, all through the game to actually compete in the extreme foreign territory and a strong opposition like India. So, what's your take on the rotation policy that England adopted?
Uh, I just think that I think they've sort of prioritized the white ball leg of the tour more than the red ball leg of the tour. So they obviously didn't have their strongest team because if they had to have their strongest team, then you'd probably say George Butler would have been there throughout. You'd have thought Moeen Ali would have been there throughout. If he was considered so important to be to bench Bess, who had played 3 Test matches until that point in time, and then get him just in for just that game, knowing that he was going to go back. So that means that he was their frontline first choice spinner, and the fact that he was not going to be made available for the last test meant that it was weakening the team. So certainly I think they did not come in with their strongest squad. The strongest squad was not available, so I think that certainly had an impact on how they went about things. I think it probably also messed about their. I think it probably dealt Joe Root probably a weaker hand than he would have liked to, but they obviously made a choice. I don't think anyone is grudging them the time away from the bubble and spending time at home, but it certainly meant that the options available were not the first choice options, or not always the first choice options.
Absolutely, I agree. And I felt even among the options available, there were times where probably they took the wrong call in terms of their team selection and playing 11. The third test in Ahmedabad, they probably got too carried away by the pink ball test and probably loaded their team with one seamer too many. And conversely, in the fourth test, they probably had one batsman too many, and probably uh, they were slightly exposed in terms of their bowling, especially
Yeah.
when one of their bowlers, the frontline bowlers, was actually not very confident going into this game. So all in all, both combination of rotation policy and also some problematic selection for the specific game meant that England never actually showed their full strength against a pretty desperate Indian team actually.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. And even with the squad that they had, there were certainly moments where it felt that they could win games. They just didn't seize the opportunity. The final test match being a case in point. They had India on the mat at 146 for 6 in the first innings, only for two splendid young batsmen to show their mettle, which is kind of again is a nice segue into something that we want to talk about, the emergence of excellent bench strength. I think no one would have thought Washington Sundar would having seen him in the IPL for whatever periods that he's batted. I always got the impression that he was technically correct. He was not a big hitter, but he had a good technical base to sort of play, and he's just taken his chances, and he's played fantastically well, be it in Australia, be it in India. And then you've had on the bowling front, you've had Siraj and Axar just take to test cricket like duck to water, and I think it's everyone knows that it's been a breakthrough season for Rishabh Pant. It's been fantastic watching him bat. It's been fantastic watching him show great confidence on the test scene, and I've just loved hearing him on the stump mic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think you probably chose the right phrase there, seizing the right moment. And seizing the right moment were these young players who, as we just discussed earlier, the top order actually had a lot of cracks that these newcomers nicely papered over. So I think
Yeah,
nobody is talking about it because of how fantastically these players played. And it is not just one innings that we are talking about, the flashy, fantastic 100 by Rishabh Pant, in which he obviously showed the composure in his first 50 and then his flamboyance in the second 50. But you look at Washington Sundar, the innings in Chennai that he actually shepherded the tail along with a good, decent partnership with Ashwin, and then again here, 200 runs partnership, one with Rishabh Pant and then with axarpatel. That's a lot of composure. It
yeah,
is a very steady head on his shoulders. And he's got all the shots. He's actually good against spin and pace, at least for the sample that we have seen. He's equally comfortable in both offside and leg side, both good off the front foot and back foot. So much so that I think we can now consider batting as his primary skill as opposed to his bowling.
Yeah.
And who knows, he might actually be a tempting proposition going forward to replace somebody in the middle order, actually.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
when Jadeja comes back, or when we are in a more pace-friendly environment and Bumrah and who all are leading pacemen come back. So I think he has made a very strong case for himself to be included one way or the other. And that has meant that single-dimensional players of the sort of Kuldeep Yadav, who we thought was actually the X factor with all his left arm wrist spin, is struggling to find a place in the starting 11.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's quite a emergence of these young players.
Here's an interesting question for you. With Shubman Gill's struggles in this series, do you think they might be tempted to play Sundar as an opening batsman, given that he's primarily an opening batsman?
No, I don't think I'll be tempted just yet. I think Shubman Gill is has earned enough credit
Yeah.
and has shown enough promise
Yeah.
to keep going. I
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
we tend to have knee-jerk reactions and but I think he's got to be persisted with. He's someone that Indian cricket must invest in.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, I wouldn't actually at this stage, despite the low scores of most of the top order batsmen, I won't be in a position to name any single player who is probably in danger of being left out. So
Yeah.
I think everybody will stick on,
Yeah.
but then again, they must realize that the clock is ticking.
Yeah, and I think that's been a trend with this team as well over the past couple of years. That if you're injured and you go out, someone who comes in, obviously gets their chances. But once the first choice player is fit and available, I think they just sort of come back in, and whoever replaces them has to just sit out and wait for their turn again. Which thankfully so far has worked in the favor of the Indian team, because the first 11 does well, and the bench has also sort of stepped in and done really well. So it'll be interesting to see, especially with the England tour upcoming this summer. It'll be really interesting to see how we've got plenty of choices, so it should really be a good series to look forward to. Um, what else did you? What else was there? I was just going through some of the things that I noted down. I think we talked about. Um, we talked about the rotation policy. We talked about the pitches. Um, Umpiring, DRS.
Interesting, interesting. I would say as the series went on, if I actually have to basically rate all the umpires, I'll probably rate all the on-field umpires very well.
Yeah.
Despite there being question marks and always a sense of suspicion, a sense of doubt about not having neutral umpires, you're having home umpires these days. I think they've done their reputation no harm. Nitin Menon in particular has actually had fantastic outings. He's been
Yeah.
the on-field umpire for all the four tests.
Yeah.
And the more controversial or that those kind of calls, the ones that you second guess, that you're forced to second guess, are the ones that were actually made by the third umpire, which is very
Yeah.
strange in the day and age of this technology where you
Yeah.
have pretty much every camera angle covered. And
Yeah.
yeah, and some of the mistakes, that some of the errors, that was schoolboyish, I would say. Especially the Rahane DRS, I think from the second test in Chennai. That is when they had Rohit and Rahane had actually strung together a very good partnership.
Yeah.
So it obviously didn't turn out to be very costly for England. But I believe that regardless of the stage of the game, such errors as a TV umpire are probably beyond excuse.
Yeah, I think it's going to be it's going to be interesting to see how all of this sort of leads to evolution in the DRS laws as well, because I think there's been a fair amount of clamor on umpire's call, for example. I don't think it should change. I think there's there's the umpire is there on the field for a reason. So, at the end of the day, if you're going to trust his judgment, then you might as well, stick to his judgment and, leave the umpire's call as it is. But I think there'll certainly be some more protocols, I think, sort of established. I'd also like to see some consistency in the, I don't know what sort of infrastructure they were using for the DRS, review, the DRS infrastructure in this series. But if I compare this one with say the series that happened in Australia, the reviews were quicker. I thought there were more camera angles which are available. So it just felt that there's somewhere something was missing in this series as far as aiding the third umpire with all the necessary information. I think there are also a couple of bump ball catches which turned out to be interesting. I think there's a Stokes one which was disallowed, Rahane one which was considered, which was allowed. So yeah, somewhere you're sort of left scratching your head to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking of umpiring decisions, the one on-field decision that actually made me question the laws, or in fact just wonder how complex this game is for a newcomer to begin following, was the LBW about a shot being offered or not. I don't remember who the batsman was, but you felt that the batsman was actually playing with the bat tucked in behind the pad.
It has to be Pujara then.
Most likely it was Pujara, and with complete certainty, the England players felt that he wasn't offering a shot, and they were well within their rights to go for the review. And just after they had called for the review, they confirmed it with the on-field umpire, and the on-field umpire ruled it as the shot was actually being played. So that is a very gray area, and I think England has been on the receiving end on more than one occasion in such decisions. So I think there needs to be more clarity. If I recall correctly, in the India-Australia series, I would recall Nathan Lyon inquiring from with the umpire whether the shot was being offered or not before actually contemplating a review. So there has to be clarity on what is the protocol there. I mean, it just makes for unnecessary doubts creeping into the viewer's mind in terms of the standard of umpiring, where by and large the standard was actually very good.
Yeah, I hear you. I think there were very few on-field decisions which were actually reversed when they were referred, and there were quite a few which were reversed. Quite a few which were referred. So it was a very good series for the on-field umpires. I just briefly wanted to touch upon it because you brought out Pujara's batting. I think over the course of the last two series, probably spinners especially have bowled well to Pujara, in the sense that even in Australia, Nathan Lyon, I think he bowled well. He didn't get him out. But you almost sort of, I think spinners have now realized with Pujara that he's basically going to be playing, two shots. He's either going to come on the front foot and defend, or come down the track and try to work you through mid wicket. So it'll be interesting to see how Pujara's, game against spin. He's been fantastic over the years. But now that teams have started to sort of come up with a strategy against him, it'll be interesting to see how he evolves. If he's going to be playing T20 this season for CSK. He's going to, he's obviously going to come up with probably a couple of new shots. It'll be interesting to see if he brings out the sweep, because he's someone who never sweeps. So let's see what happens there. Right. I think we've covered pretty much everything that we wanted to discuss. Your player of the series?
I think rightly Ravichandran Ashwin for his all-round performance. I think the 100 was a cherry on the cake. He went past 400 wickets in the series, and he was pretty much unstoppable right from the second innings in Chennai, where he actually ended up with 6 wickets.
Yeah,
I remember Michael Vaughan shouting that England should have always declared earlier when they had enough on the board to basically not let Ashwin into his groove. And probably that's the worst fear that came true for most of the English supporters. So he, along with Axar Patel probably is the find of the series, I would say, in terms of India. But as a player of the series, in terms of the overall package, in terms of the overall performance, Ashwin is rightly the player of the series for me.
Yeah, axarpatel. To be honest, before the series started, I had a look at his stats, his domestic record, and they were nothing great. They were nothing, to shout from the rooftops. I think he averaged about 27 or 20, 27, something like that, with a decent average, decent strike rate. But he's obviously been elevated to a different level in this series. I think what really stood out was his control and consistency. um, you know, the wickets I thought were a byproduct of those two aspects. He had fantastic control, and he had fantastic consistency, landing the ball in a particular spot and letting the pitch do the rest. So I think that was brilliant. But Ravi Ashwin, I was really pleased for him to see him get that century. Uh, Especially in Chennai, I think it's a great being a Chennai boy. I wish I could have been in the stadium to watch him that day, but it was a fantastic moment. And I think in that particular innings, I think he really showed that you can bat on that pitch when there was a lot of questions being raised on that pitch. So I think brilliant series for him, and I really hope he carries that batting form into the England series as well, because I think he's kind of between him and Jadeja, there's been this overseas spinner spot where he's lost out to Jadeja over the last couple of years because of his batting, and I think if he continues in this vein, India could very well play three seamers and two spinners, and in the England tour, especially because it's being held in the summer. Uh,
Yeah.
British summer and all. I think we can still making allowances for that. I think there's certainly a case to play Jadeja at 7, Ashwin at 8, and then 3 frontline seamers. So here's wishing he continues in the same batting vein. All this means that India will be facing New Zealand in the World Test Championship final, and I think Ganguly came out in a news conference today saying that it's likely to be played at Southampton. Predictions?
I don't know. The fact that New Zealand are going to be in England playing a 2-match series prior to that World Test Championship finals would probably give them the upper hand. But then you won't know who among the New Zealand players are going to be available for that Test series, considering actually clashes with the latter stages of the IPL. So it's going to be interesting for sure. But I believe their familiarity with the swinging conditions back home. If they are on the money, they are going to be challenging India all along. India has actually seen what they are capable of right from the 2019 World Cup semi-finals. And they are a team that are never to be taken lightly. And frankly, I think the two most deserving teams have made it to the finals. So I believe it actually, I hope it lives up to its hype and worth. In terms of the quality.
And if the game does end up being played at Southampton, I remember when India last toured England in 2018. One of the tests was played at Southampton, although it was probably a little later in the year. But the pitch certainly turned, and I think Moeen Ali spun India out with the second innings 5-4. So even though this is going to be played in June, it's not probably going to be the same. It'll still be interesting to see how what sort of pitch comes up. But I think there'll certainly be some encouragement for spinners towards the end of the test. So I'm just hoping it'll be a fantastic test. I was listening to Ashwin's podcast the other day, and he was saying it should have been a 3-test match final rather than a single test match final. So. But hopefully the ICC learns from this and puts up a proper final series in the next cycle. That'll make it a lot more interesting.
Oh, don't get me started with all the gaps and the flaws in this current cycle of World Test Championship. For all, actually, England and New Zealand actually played a bilateral series in New Zealand, which was in this cycle but not counted towards the World Test Championship. So it was one of the many flaws, I would say.
Yeah. It was bizarre. But anyway, I mean, this is where we are. At least we've had plenty of cricket over the past 6 months, which has been which has been brilliant, which has given us something to cheer over the past few months in lockdown. And we're eagerly looking forward to the Test Championship in June. I think sometime in the middle of June. We've also got plenty of cricket action happening elsewhere around the world. We've got the IPL coming up. It's already generating a lot of news. There's plenty of cricket happening elsewhere. So I think we're going to do another recording in a couple of days' time to talk about what else is happening across the world. So stay tuned. There's another episode coming to you guys, and even though we've had a bit of a break, I think we're going to be back a bit more regular. We're not going to be doing the daily episodes like the ones that we did during the IPL, but we're probably going to have weekly or fortnightly podcast, longer conversations. So something that you can just leave on in the background, go get on with your chores, but still enjoy. That's all from us. Have a lovely day.